right, so as many of you may know, the Game Awards are right around the corner. In fact, they're actually next week. And this led me to actually vote for the first time ever for the Game of the Year. Yes, you can vote for these. I did not know that ahead of time, that the general population could just go in, cast their votes for all of the different categories, but one game in particular really incentivized and really inspired me to do this, and that's Tears of the Kingdom. I was doing a little research to see if the Game of the Year awards had been announced yet, the official one. I went online, did a little bit of research, and I found out that not only was it next week, but you could actually vote yourself. So I did not notice beforehand. Maybe I'm a complete newbie. I mean, I've been, at least to voting, I've been playing video games for my entire life, so the last 4 decades, but I didn't know you could actually vote. So I took it upon myself this weekend to vote for Tears of the Kingdom, which, as you all know, if you've been following my channel, watching some of my videos, that it's by far one of my favorite games of all time. And it's just been a magical, wonderful journey going through, playing, and eventually beating it after 350 plus hours. That's how much I enjoyed it. Of course, the first 10 hours was just played, messing around, exploring, pretty much just, skateboarding and snowboarding through the entire world. So there was definitely some of that, just the initial awe and wonderment at this awesome new game and what it had in store for all the people who were willing to play it. So long story short, I voted for Tears of the Kingdom, but then looking into it, I realized that since this is such a crazy competitive year with so many great games coming across so many different consoles, I was doing a little bit of research and I looked into it and I don't think it is the heavy on favorite to win. I actually had been hearing from a lot of other people that some of the other games within the category are going to give it a lot of competition. So I guess knowing and being heavily biased that I played through this game, absolutely loved it. And it was completely innovative, no pun intended, game-changing life experience for both myself as a gamer, but also as myself throughout my entire life, since I pretty much just stopped what I was doing and played this game straight throughout the last couple of months whenever I had free time, whether on the weekend or at night after work. The cultural impact, the amount of innovation, just so many things went into this game that made it so special. And I thought what I would do before the Game of the Year gets announced next week is come on here and just give you my top 8 reasons why I think Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom deserves to win Game of the Year. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I greatly appreciate it. Also, make sure that you turn on notifications so you're able to hear about any new videos that I have right away and able to check those out before anyone else does. So without further ado, I'm going to be jumping right into why I think Tears of the Kingdom 100% undoubtedly deserves Game of the Year for 2023. All right, coming in at number 8, the top 8 reason why I think Tears of the Kingdom deserves 2023's Game of the Year award is that it was probably one of the most anticipated games of all time. The sequel to the game that won 2017's Game of the Year and many other accolades throughout the gaming industry. It was such a highly anticipated game. I know me, myself personally, waiting the 6, very, very long years until it came out, there was so much pressure on this game to execute, to deliver, and make this an amazing experience. I can't imagine how much backlash there would have been if this game wasn't absolutely 100% fantastic. And the reason why I mentioned that is because it not only delivered on that, but it also gave us all just an incredible, absolute masterpiece of a game that I don't think that a lot of us were expecting. And then also, it was so innovative in not just the physics system within the innovative gameplay, but also in the story that it was able to tell throughout musical scores, throughout the sound effects, throughout the character development, and all the new aspects that are brought to this wonderful franchise. on the surface, when you first start playing this game, you're thinking, oh, like, this is, just going to be Breath of the Wild, part 2. There's going to be the same world. I'm going to be doing very similar to what I did in Breath of the Wild 1. And you're immediately, I would say even within 15, 20 minutes of this game, you realize that this is a completely different spin on Breath of the Wild. And it's also going to take you on a much more engaging and just otherworldly adventure. As much as I loved the first Breath of the Wild, this game was Tears of the Kingdom was so much better than it that I actually have absolutely no desire to go back and ever play the first Breath of the Wild ever again, because that's how good this game was. It absolutely knocked it out of the park. It took those, absolutely mountain high expectations. It delivered, and it was just like a cultural and absolute just gaming phenomenon. I mean, and all of my followers and all the people that I also follow that are much larger than me, I was looking through the kind of like the same journey that we were all going on as we played Tears of the Kingdom. You start by, hey, I'm just going to give it a try, see what it's all about. And then as soon as you get off the Great Sky Island, you start realizing that the power of this game is in that exploration factor of being able to do whatever you want to. Yeah, there are certainly, more linear missions on how to get certain capabilities, to explore certain areas and do certain things, but it's really up to you to do whatever you want. Go to whatever shiny object, tickles your fancy. Go to and start trying to defeat whatever level of monster you possibly can. And there's just so much within this game that allows you to creatively explore it, while at the same time too, just so expansive that you really never got bored. And, the one thing that I'll touch on right away in the same number 8 spot is that one of the biggest, pieces of negative feedback about this game is it didn't have a DLC, and there was no plans on having a DLC. And what I will do to challenge anyone who says that is that the DLC, try to complete the game. If you're really, want more content, go into the depths, try to beat every single like overworld mini boss there is, try to collect those trophies, try to go to every single one of the different shrines, try to go to all the different light posts in the depths, and try to just experience as much as you possibly can. Also try to collect all the different armors. That was one of the first things I did in order to try to complete it. That was just so much fun to do, because you ended up exploring all the caves, you ended up seeing all the different, missions and side quests and even mini games. They were so much fun to play. So, there's just so much this game has that I ended up playing with for over 350 hours, and I completed, I would say, probably 75% of it. I still have a few things to do, like, the Korok seeds, and then also a few of the side quests. But, what I've found with this game is it's so much fun that even after beating this game, I still dream about and want to go back to and play this game to complete it, because I don't want it to ever end. That's how good this game is, that even after you beat it, you just don't want that experience to ever end, because you're almost like addicted to it, but in a good way. So that's number 8. This game had mighty high expectations, and it absolutely knocked it out of the park. All right, coming in at number 7 on why Tears of the Kingdom deserves 2023's Game of the Year is the introduction of the depths. Yes, my favorite place to explore in this entire game. And I'm just going to walk you through the adventure that I had with the depths. When I first started playing this game, I was scared to death to go into depths. Like many of you, when you first start playing this game, you go on that mission to try to get the additional capabilities. You kind of go like linearly through. Linearly, is that a word? Well, you go logically through what you would do to start collecting, a few of the first basic capabilities, and just, appease the NPCs, right? And then maybe collect a few things in return. So, or maybe even get some strategy on how to progress in the game. But as soon as you get into the depths, it's this scary, dark, non-illuminated area where you literally do not know what's going to happen next, what's around the corner, or even like the texture, or even like how it's set up. Like, is there going to be a mountain? Is there going to be a lake? Is there going to be a bad guy? I don't know. Is there going to be an overworld boss within the depths that's going to like one-shot me and kill me that I'm going to have to go back to later and absolutely OP beat? I don't know. Potentially. There's so many things that the devs introduced in such a cool way that it's just, I mean, when you first play this game, you are kind of naturally scared of it because you don't know what's around the corner or up the hill or having to climb or anything in the depths. But when you start exploring, you realize all the coolest stuff is down there, right? The blueprints to help, start thinking of ideas to build new models and new, different things you can ride around on or to help you in your continual exploration of the game. And you also realize there's some really cool items there that will help you on, especially in your battles. So all the best stuff is essentially in the depths, and also that's where you find the weapons that haven't been riddled with gloom, right? So you find these pristine weapons that you can attach things to with your new capabilities, and you can start to really, see that the depths are the best place to collect weapons, items, defeat bad guys, and even the other part of the depths that's really cool too is you just start to collect the zonite, which you can use to build up your battery. So there's kind of I would say, a more complex way to build it up and eventually, increase the amount of battery that you have so you can use those for, your various different contraptions that you're going to build throughout this game to, again, creatively explore how you want to adventure, how you want to battle, and how you just want to maybe fly through this game, right? If you, like everyone else who eventually figured out how to buy, or how to, not how to buy, but how to build that, the fan hoverboard, right? So, which was amazing, by the way. And I think it kept on getting perfected to the point where, you could get it and build it the first time and be able to duplicate that whenever you wanted to down the road. So it was such an amazing thing to be able to do that. And that's just one aspect of why, going through the depths, being able to explore every nook and cranny that is unknown at first, get to the light roots, be able to, really illuminate all the rest of the areas. It was such a cool part of it. It was almost like in all the other Legend of Zeldas, as you would explore caves, you would get items. That's where all your best stuff came from. The depths was like this one huge cavernous, cave, not to say it twice, where you found all the best stuff in the game, you beat the best bad guys, and you collected even the type of weapons that would allow you to really do some heavy damage later on in the game. So the depths, as much as I was scared to death of it at first, ended up being my absolute favorite place towards the end of the game to explore. And one thing that I would suggest you do, if you're further along in the game and you haven't done this already, and you've already lit up all the light routes within the depths, build yourself one of those fan bikes and just fly around towards the top of the ceiling of the depths just to see the architecture of it. I posted a video probably 2 months ago of just me doing that for a couple minutes. And that by itself, and of course I had Sister Christian Night Ranger playing right in the background. So, but whatever music you want to listen to as you cruise the depths, I highly suggest doing it at least once as you play through this game because it's such a fun experience doing that. And the depths, although it was scary at first, ended up being my absolute favorite part of the game to explore. Coming in at number 6 of why I think Tears of the Kingdom is this year's Game of the Year is the new capabilities that you learn in this game. Yes, as you remember from 2017's Breath of the Wild, there were some really cool capabilities that allowed you to go through shrines, allowed you to fight enemies, and overall allowed you to explore and also get new items in the game. So, that was heavily innovated and also expanded upon in this second Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. So many cool things that you can now do in this game. And, I kind of wondered how they were going to do this because obviously they couldn't just have the same exact capabilities from the first game. That wouldn't be fun. That wouldn't be new. And that wouldn't be really that innovative. You'd just be doing the same stuff, right? But, being able to fuse like seriously anything to any shield or any weapon or to other stuff too is just really opened up the amount of, exploration that you could do within the environment, that you could do in trying to defeat bad guys, and even how you try to traverse the land too before you started building your one of a kind fan bikes, right? So the abilities in this game are so freaking cool. So, and not just the fuse ability too, like being able to actually, elevate through specific different minerals, rock formations, or even like, in the beginning of the game when you're first learning how to use it, you can seriously just ascend through different parts to get you like kind of like that that shortcut to where you're trying to go without having to climb it. And we all know from the first game, one of the things and areas of, let's just call it potentially negative feedback, was trying to climb mountainous areas when it was raining outside because you kept on slipping down, right? Well, this in some ways kind of solved or at least aided in it and being able to ascend directly up without having to climb or having to build some kind of machine to try to fly up, at an angle or something. And especially earlier in the game, this was so incredibly useful because you couldn't just use it to explore. You could also use it to defeat bad guys too. So if you were in battle and you were facing one of the, taluses, but one of the fortress ones, you could actually ascend through it and start wailing on the, the piece of the rock that really would let you defeat the talus and then also defeat all the bad guys on board too. So like there were so many cool things like that within the game. Now, some of the other, abilities you probably don't use quite as much, but just the absolute Hall of Fame ones are the fuse capability and then also ascend. I mean, I actually read and heard that the ascend capability was at first a cheat code that they wanted to make so they could test a game. Developers could test a game, but then they had so much fun using. They're like, why not let's just keep this in the game? And how much of a treat was that for you when you first were playing this game and you realized that you could just ascend instead of having to climb? That was, I don't know if all you had the same epiphany, but when I figured that out, and then also like how you could use it in battle and how you could use it in like almost combinations in battle or in real time with bullet time too, like there's just so much cool stuff you could do with it to almost like do your own cheats in the game or your own shortcuts. And, I can't imagine that all the different developers of this game and, software engineers didn't think that, through all these endless possibilities, right? Because they must have tested it for hours on end and realized like just, hey, it would be more fun to keep all this stuff in, right? And, also too, along with the capabilities, I should just mention too, like part of that is also, directly related to the weapon degradation from the first Breath of the Wild, right? Eventually your weapons would break. You'd have to go find new ones. All right, cool. So what this game does is it allows you to fuse, new drops from any enemies you defeat to your current weapon, whether it be pristine from the depths or whether it be, gloomified from up above ground. And, it would almost like reward you for going and defeating new groups of enemies because you would then have new drops in order you could add to your current weapons and you could have them be more durable because it would take damage from the actual fused item first. So that, along with just how the game worked and how the game really sets you up for success and being able to use all the capabilities together in order to really continue exploring and continuing to master this game. I found myself throughout this whole game, one of the most fun aspects of it was being able to learn in specific situations, whether in battle or exploration, how I could use these capabilities to really continue having fun in new ways with this game. So coming in at number 6 are 100% the capabilities that are not just like a huge improvement. And I know I only touched on a few. I could touch on the capabilities for probably hours on end, but I realized I don't want this video to last for hours on end. So there are, of course, other ones too as well, but those are my 2 favorites. So coming in at number 6, the new capabilities were awesome. All right, the number 5 reason why I think Tears of the Kingdom is 2023's Game of the Year is that, and I'm not sure how else to word this, but the item collection just made way more sense and was way more useful. So going back in time and looking at the first Breath of the Wild, there are so many awesome things about it. it won Game of the Year that year. It 100% deserved it. But as you went through that game, you kind of felt like you were unnecessarily just collecting a ton of stuff, right? If it didn't add towards your health or like, would allow you to make the necessary buffs in order for you to gain attack power, get, some kind of resistance or some kind of defense mechanism, then, really wasn't worth your time, right? You'd end up finishing the first Breath of the Wild with all of these items that you may or may not have used. And you're kind of just, some of the times as you were going through the first Breath of the Wild and defeating all the mini bosses and also bosses of the various different areas of the game, you're just kind of like left scratching your head sometimes like, was that really necessary? Did I need to do that? And many of the times looking back at Breath of the Wild, it's like, no, I absolutely did not need to do that. Being the completionist type of gamer that I am, I always want to explore every nook and cranny. I want to collect everything. So in the first Breath of the Wild, of course, I did as much as I possibly could, except for those damn Korok seeds. I was not going to collect all those in the first Breath of the Wild, and now that I have Tears of the Kingdom, I'm not going to go back and ever do that in the first Breath of the Wild. But, kudos to everyone that did that and got the golden poo emoji items. So, but, comparing that directly to the new kind of how the item collection and reward system worked in Tears of the Kingdom, everything made a lot more sense and it was a lot more efficient, right? Like, so you would go into the depths, you would collect all these items that would help you in battle, that would help you beat like some of the most difficult bad guys in the game, like Lionels, or even like allow you to confuse big groups of enemies so they would fight each other. So before you went into battle, you wouldn't have to go in, with them at full health all attacking you. You could have them, confused and attacking each other first. Or you could, use your items to defeat much more difficult bosses to get their drops to make some of the most fantastic weapons in the game. And then also too, not just, items that you would use to, cook up specific buffs or, make things last longer, those, duration, and also, especially if you faced and got any of the drops from the Gleeoks, like those are absolutely fantastic for that, right? But it also just made more sense when it came to the special items that you would receive in the game too. So as you went through all the different, dungeons in the game, you collected, the spirit orbs, I think they were, from all the, your companions that would help you along the way from the different dungeons. It just like kept on leveling up and stacking in a way that allowed you to even more, dominate the game or play the game in a way that made it easier for you. So I'm not sure how else to say that, but like the item collection never felt like tedious or like a fetch quest in this game. It always felt like you were doing things in a certain way that would allow you to become better and better at this game and allow you to ultimately have more fun exploring the game. So, and, not just the battery system where you'd be able to, keep on building your battery in order to get to the point where you'd be able to just fly around for as long as you wanted to, or, build specific, zonite, either they, whether they be vehicles, whether they be weapons, whether they be fully automated, Korok killing or bad guy killing machines, whatever they were in the game, there were some super, super creative things that people built. And, trust me, I looked at all those and I wish I had the creative genius that some of these gamers had, right? But those items, whether they just be items that you use to heal yourself or give you buffs, or they be special items that allow you to really continue exploring the game and being the games in even a more overpowered way, it was such a cool aspect of it that you never felt like, like whenever you got like a new mission or you had to do something, you never felt like, oh man, I gotta go collect 10 of these or 20 of these. You thought like, oh, this is an exploration, opportunity for me to go and do X and to keep on doing Y and eventually get to Z, right? Like it was very layered and very hierarchical, but it just was so much more fun than the first game. So I'm not quite sure how to word that, but the item collection and also mastering system was just, I just think, way better than the first game. And if the first game won the Game of the Year award, I can't imagine this not being a shoo-in. But of course, it does have some pretty heavy competition in the category. So that's reason number 5. The item collection and mastering system was just amazing. All right. The number 4 reason why I believe Tears of the Kingdom is 2023's video game of the year is, and I know this had to come at some point, and we all know this had to come at some point, but the improved dungeons. Yes. So as many of you who played the first Breath of the Wild, as you traverse through the entire, landscape, as you adventured through and you started to level up, go to more shrines, start to get your health and also, your stamina meters, through the roof, get them to the good place where you can start to, defeat, stronger, better, uglier enemies, right? As you went through all that in the first Breath of the Wild, you eventually got to the point where you were just thinking to yourself and you're like, all right, well, now it's logically, I'm going to be taking on this next dungeon, right? And, the dungeons were super cool. When you first played the first 1 or 2 of them, right? I, just logically came up to the first one, which was the elephant one. I can't remember the exact name of it, but and I thought it was absolutely amazing. It was really cool, like how the mechanics worked of it, and how you had to kind of go through it. You had to kind of defeat all the enemies within it and figure out the puzzle that allowed you to eventually unlock all the different keys and get you to the point where you were going to face, the divine beast within it, right? That's been, taken over by, Ganon and all his minions, right? So all the Ganon blights, right? So that was really cool in the first Breath of the Wild, like the first or maybe the second time you went through it. But then as you're going through, which was really only 4 dungeons, right? As you're going through all these different divine beasts that were taken over by, Ganon blights, right? You saw a lot of repetition. You saw a lot of the same things. They weren't necessarily challenging, although I will say there was a super steep increase in difficulty when you went to the camel or Gerudo one versus all the other ones. I thought all the other ones were super easy in their first Breath of the Wild, all the ones except for Gerudo. For whatever reason, you got to that one, it was not just a whole lot more complex, but also the Ganon Blight, evil spirit within it, end boss. I can't remember his exact name either. That was 6 years ago, right? But when you faced him, he was a lot more difficult as well. But, overall, just looking at all 4 of those original dungeons in the first Breath of the Wild, they weren't super hard and they were very repetitive. They did the same thing. And it was kind of like you were left with this sense of I wish this would have been a little bit more unique. I wish it would have been a little bit more, more something else, right? So, and that definitely was one of the areas of criticism for the first game. I mean, as amazing as the first game was, there were some things that kind of left, your head scratching. They probably could have done this differently. And then also too, and I'll mention this, is that the end game for the first one, included in the dungeon aspect for just being number 4, is that you kind of, as you went into the, Hyrule Castle and you were, going to go defeat the end boss to this entire, game in the first Breath of the Wild, you just had to go to the very top of it and then fall in, and then there you were. You didn't have to, you didn't have to do the same type of adventuring and going through all the unlocks and mechanisms that you had to do and all the dungeons that kind of preceded that. So Hyrule Castle in the first Breath of the Wild wasn't even really a dungeon. It was just kind of there to collect the Hylian shield, and then a few other really cool things, overpowered weapons in there. But other than that, it was kind of the place you went to beat the game, right? There was nothing that special about it. Now, I will say this, it looked cool as heck. It was amazing looking, and the vibe you got was definitely a scary, atmospheric, kind of nightmarish vibe. So that it did that amazingly well, but it left a little bit more for the imagination. And definitely, so comparing that in the first Breath of the Wild to what was in Tears of the Kingdom was night and day, literally, because as you approached the very first, whatever dungeon you ended up going to first, whatever temple you ended up going to first in Tears of the Kingdom, I ended up going to the fire one first, which was amazing. It immediately reminds you of all the best aspects that you would imagine in an Ocarina of Time temple, right? Like you go into it, the name comes across and you kind of are trying to traverse and you start to realize that like, oh, so like you're given this type of new capability from the sage that kind of, goes along with you to the specific, temple. And you're able to use that all around in new ways to explore the various different, catacombs, the rooms, the bad guys, and even, get to new areas within that temple in order to beat it. And it was just such a cool way of organizing it and just structuring it in a way that made you have a lot of fun in exploring each and every temple. So, and of course, that's just the very first initial one I went to, but then they all kind of had a similar, and I guess I will say that that wasn't super unique for all the temples within Tears of the Kingdom, is they all kind of allowed you to use that new sage capability within the temple in order to defeat bad guys, in order to defeat the boss, and then eventually have that sage be a companion right after you beat the specific temple you were in. But while that was kind of unique because it had to force you to learn how to use that new capability, it just was so much more creatively done, and it just made you reminisce about the old school Zeldas, earlier in the franchise that did dungeon layouts and design so well. So it made you, it made me, it reminded me of Ocarina of Time dungeons, or even like, in some aspects, like a Link to the Past dungeons, which, those are like two of my favorite Legend of Zeldas of all time. So it was much more kind of like a balance of all the aspects that you would expect from those older, much better dungeon layouts and strategies of the older Zeldas, but then also allowed you to, explore them in a way that was more innovative to the Breath of the Wild franchise. So I just love the new dungeon layouts. I loved exploring through them. I love the boss battles within them, especially like the Gerudo one. Oh my goodness. So I'm not sure, and I would love to hear below, like, let me know which one of the dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom is your favorite, but the Gerudo one, it's just chef's kiss, right? Like it reminded me so much of the dungeon within Ocarina of Time, which, besides for the water temple, yes, I actually do like the water temple in Ocarina of Time. Once you learn how to beat it, it's not so bad, but it also has my favorite room and also my favorite bad guy in that game in it. So that's probably, Dark Link. So that's probably why I'm a little biased, but, the Gerudo Valley temple within Ocarina of Time is my favorite dungeon within that game, and it also stayed true for this game as well. So kudos to that. I won't go in number 4 here into the end game because that's also kind of a dungeon, but the end game to this game is also vastly superior to the first Breath of the Wild. So that's number 4. Vastly improved dungeon layout strategy, and they were just so much more fun to explore and beat the bad guys within. All right, coming in at number 3 for why I think Tears of the Kingdom is this year's Game of the Year is the introduction of the new baddies, especially the overworld mini bosses within this game. So one of the other areas of potential criticism and feedback for the first Breath of the Wild was that it kind of had a lack of range of different and really a lack of variety of bad guys within the game, right? Other than potentially the Ganon Blights and the bosses found throughout Breath of the Wild, there really wasn't a big range of different enemies that you would come into contact with. And of course, I'm not sure if that was because like they only could, from a technology's perspective, include so many. I'm not actually sure. I'm not a software engineer, but, looking at it from that, kind of vantage point of potential feedback for the first Breath of the Wild, it definitely didn't really have a variety of different bad guys, right? But in this year's Tears of the Kingdom, there wasn't just a wide range of new bad guys, which had a whole internal experience leveling system. So the more of them that you defeated, I'm not exactly sure how it worked from like an algorithmic perspective or what the equation was, but as you defeated defeated more and more enemies throughout the game, they became harder and had better drops for you. So you wanted to level them up in terms of what kind of bad guys you were facing as fast as possible so you could get the better drops. But not just like the normal, everyday, enemies that would replenish every blood moon, but the overworld mini bosses were so freaking cool. Oh my goodness. So and I'll start with the Gleeoks, right? These big, huge dragons that were, had a specific element that they could shoot at you that were seemingly impossible to beat when you first, faced it. Like many of you, the very first Gleeok that I ever came into encounter with, I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna, see what I can do. All 4 hearts that I had, whatever crappy bow I had, the very, very foundational, shield and, armor that I had on that wasn't even leveled up yet because I hadn't visited one of the Great Fairies yet. I went into this battle not knowing the type of hurt that was about to come on me, right? So that was about to be delivered right to my doorstep. So it was so interesting as we went through this. And not just Gleeoks, but and eventually, to later in the game, as you level up all your equipment, as you get better and, you learn how to, attach a rocket to a shield, fly up in the sky and get height, or even to build specific vehicles that allow you to get more elevation, or even build, Gleeok killing devices too. There's so many cool things that you can build within this game that really help you in these kind of battles as you progress through, which is of course, one of the reasons why this game is so much fun to play as you progress through it, because it really, really does reward you for trying to think about things from a more creative and innovative standpoint, which I can't tell you how much I appreciate about this game. But not just the Gleeoks, but the Taluses, the Froxes, all of these new kind of overworld and, within the depths mini bosses that, as you went through it, you got some of the best stuff from them and the best drops that will allow you to either make your armor, your shields better, or even combined and cooked together to make durations, buff durations longer, for example, with the Gleeoks. So there's so many cool things within this game that, really expand upon the first Breath of the Wild when it came to enemies and also the boss system as well. And, I even found myself towards the end of the game, after I got to the point, which, after about, playing this game for 50 to 75 hours, I got to the point of the game where I could probably have gone and beaten it. And, I probably wouldn't have had a problem with Ganondorf. But, of course, what I wanted to do, I wanted to explore as much of it as possible, being kind of the internal completionist that I am as a gamer. That's just kind of like my style of gaming. I like to explore things. I really like to get my money's worth of games, especially huge, expansive exploration type games like this, where that's really the most fun part of this game, is not really necessarily beating the end boss, seeing the credits, but actually being able to explore everything within it, right? And, the bosses in this game, the enemies just were so fascinating, all the different things that they would drop. And, as I got to the point where I could, after 50, 75 hours, that I could probably beat this game, one of the first things I wanted to do in order to complete it, there's so many different things and I'm nowhere near completing this game. I'm probably I don't know. I'm probably somewhere between 50 and 75% the way done, actually completing, doing everything possible in the game, which is saying a lot for how much there is to do in this game. But one of the very first things I wanted to check off right away was getting the trophies for being all of the different types of bosses. So being all the Gleeoks, being all the Froxes, being all the Taluses, which, let me tell you, out of all those different bosses to face, even the cube enemies, I don't know, for whatever reason, the names of those are escaping me right now, but those in the Sky Islands, out of all those enemies, by far the hardest monster hunting trophy to get was actually the Taluses, because there's so many of them and there's so many different kinds and they're all within the ground. And I got to the point where I thought I had every single Talus defeated, and I realized that there's this one point in the map, because I always would mark it with a specific, the enemy skull if I'd already defeated a specific mini boss there. I found there was one specific area when I was, comparing what I had done to Zelda maps, which, by the way, if you don't use Zelda maps already, and I'm not, sponsored by them or anything else, but use them to help you explore this game. It's actually really fascinating, and sometimes almost kind of necessary for how huge this game is. But when I was comparing what my Zelda map to within, as you went to the mapping system within the game, two Zelda maps, I realized that there was one area where there are two taluses, and it's, pretty much in the middle, but a little bit off center to the left, where there are two taluses really close to each other, and I happened to miss the other one. So, of course, that's part of the fun of it, like going back and beating them all, getting that trophy, and just, feeling really good that you completed that aspect of it. So maybe I'm a little bit more on the completionist side, but I found that was one of the most fun things to complete in this game. So reason number 3 why this game deserves Game of the Year is the absolutely phenomenal bosses that you can face. And then they really, represent a whole new way to explore this game and really like to do new cool things in this game. So especially the Gleeoks. All right, coming in at number 2 of the reasons why I believe Tears of the Kingdom is this year's Game of the Year are the introduction of the sages. Yes. As you go through all the different dungeons or temples, whatever you want to call them, in the new Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom, you're going to get these capabilities from these sages. You're even going to be able to call them at will to aid you in battle, to also help you traverse the world, get through certain obstacles. It is just so cool. And like also too, just from like a development standpoint, it's actually kind of wild that they were able to complete some of the stuff they were in this game. Not just like thinking about like bullet time or like being able to fuse and, ultra hand items to literally anything in the game, and then being able to view it from a different perspective and move it, and just, and then like reversing of time. And it's just, there's so many elements of the physics within this game that are just represent a high level of innovation within the gaming industry, and definitely 100% within my favorite franchise of, video games of all time. But, not just that, the innovation piece, but also like when you think about like what the sages allowed you to do in the game, they allowed you to continue exploring. They allowed you to continue like just mastering, strategies for battle. Also just being able to break through rocks very simply, right? Or not have to use your own items and have you degrade your own weapons in order to break things, in order to mine for specific items that allowed you to upgrade your armors or, your weapons, anything like that. So it was just so cool to have the sages, because they were these companions that would help you in battle. They would also allow you to shield you in some cases, and you could even use them in combinations with each other, right? There's just so many cool new possibilities that the sages represented that you could help to really play this game. And, honestly too, like as you collected, and I'll say all 5 of the sages, because there's a secret sage too, which also represents probably my favorite sub-quest. I guess it's technically not a sub-quest because it is part of the main storyline. But getting Minoru, oh my goodness. Can we just stop for a second and say how cool of a mission that was in this game? Like how cool of a quest that was, whatever you want to call it. It was the secret stage. And, I'm only saying that, no spoilers, but I'm sure by now, that Minoru is the secret stage in Tears of the Kingdom. Maybe I'll put a little spoiler alert down here for this part, just to make sure that in case you haven't played this game, which, I highly recommend you playing it. The whole just quest you go on to get Minoru, as you go through that temple and the depths, you transport all the body parts. And at the very end of that, you get to face essentially like a video game version of Sock'em, Rocket Sock'em, robots, right? Which I don't know why someone hasn't developed a video game just dedicated to that, because it seems like it would be a knockout success, right? It's like BattleBots, but for Minoru and, the enemy you have to face within the Spirit Temple. So, oh my goodness, that was just such a fun quest. Actually, that ended up being my favorite one of the different quests within this game. Technically, all the dungeons, I think, are optional, right? Because you can just go and try to take on Ganondorf by himself. But spoiler alert, if you do that, I think you have to face the enemies from all of the, or the end bosses from all the dungeons. You know, kind of like this is Tears of the Kingdom's take on, you know, the end, you know, part for the first Breath of the Wild, where if you didn't defeat all the Defiant Beasts and, you know, conquer those first, you didn't get half the life taken away. And I think you had to face them too. So I guess that's somewhat similar in the end game, but you're definitely going to want to do it because it's just so much fun, right? And that's, you know, I could go on and on about Minoru and how much fun that quest was, but I think the biggest thing from being able to use the sages was just how you approach things and how you were able to creatively, you know, deliver devastating blows to bad guys. You could even update and make stronger your connection with each one of the sages if you connected. I think they were spirit orbs, or there was some kind of item that you could collect that were hidden throughout. I think mostly in the Sky Islands. I think actually they were all in the Sky Islands, but you essentially collect 4 of those and you could increase your connection with each one of the sages to make it stronger. What that helped you was it made sure that they could you know, increase their attack power while attacking enemies when you were in combat, which was absolutely amazing. So yeah, the sages were such a great addition. And I will touch on this just to make sure I'm trying to be, I mean, this whole thing is biased, right? Because I love the game, but the one thing about it is that towards the end of the game, you did kind of sort of deactivate, or I was much more prone to deactivating the sage's will, because some of them were just too much to have on screen at once. And I will say too, sometimes the AI, the artificial intelligence that kind of drove where they would go when they were with you in battle wasn't always perfect. Like sometimes you're just like, I don't know what they're doing. It'd be more helpful if they were actually, you know, fighting the people that I was fighting or helping me out. But I will say, just knowing that you had these sages have your back, and then the different quests you went on to actually get them, that were a part of the dungeon, the layering of the dungeon strategy and how great the dungeons were. And also, too, being able to use them for things outside of combat were great, too. Towards the end, I really just used the adorable little bird, like Tulin, right? He actually, out of all the stages, is probably the most helpful, because not only like when you were on the paraglider, you could, you know, he could give you a gust to go further and longer. But also, too, like, I can't tell you how many battles I was in earlier in the game, because he was the second stage I got. I think he was actually supposed to be the first stage you logically go to, but hey, that's part of exploring the game in new ways, right? But as soon as I got him, I would always have him out in battle, and I can't tell you how many direct critical shots he would do on enemies when I was in battle to help save my behind. So he definitely was the one I used the most of down the road. So overall, reason number 2 why this game rocks is and deserves Game of the Year is because of the introduction of the sages. All right, drum roll, please. Woo! All right, the number 1 reason why I think Tears of the Kingdom deserves this year's 2023's Game of the Year award is the vastly improved and absolutely epic endgame. The endgame sequence to Tears of the Kingdom is not just epic in its own right, but it brings the story together so nicely. There are so many epic moments. I won't ruin everything within the endgame sequence because I want you to be able to experience that for yourself. But when you look back at Legend of Zelda epic moments, and I'll share these because these are games from 20 or 30 years ago, but when you think of A Link to the Past, and when you first get the Master Sword and you're in Hyrule Forest, and just that scene, that's such an epic moment like that. Or when you're in Ocarina of Time and you go back in time and you also get the Master Sword, or when you find out that, Princess Zelda has, a specific, alter ego that's been helping you out the whole game, and just these kind of epic moments Tears of the Kingdom had in spades. And I won't go into all of them because I don't really want to ruin them for anyone who hasn't played that far into the Tears of the Kingdom. I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you probably are a big fan of Tears of the Kingdom, or at least you're really interested in potentially playing the game sometime. But there are so many, as you kind of collect all the tears throughout the game and you start to realize what happened and led you to the point of where you're going to go and collect the Master Sword. there's like one scene in there that like actually even brought a tear to my eye because it was so emotional. It was so climactic. It was just so perfect. And yeah, when you get to that point in the game, you'll know exactly what scene I'm talking about. And that was even before you faced the end game sequence. Now, what I will do is I'll try to talk about it a little bit more generically because I don't want to give it away. But let's just say when we compare the end game sequence and what happens in it in Tears of the Kingdom to the first Breath of the Wild, oh my goodness, it spans upon it in all the right ways, right? When we think about the first Breath of the Wild, you just literally go to the top of Hyrule Castle, you face, you face Ganon, you face the Beast version again, and then that's the game. And hopefully you got all the memories, so you get to see the good ending to the game, and you're kind of like left with like the end boss to the first game like wasn't that hard. It was cool like, from a visual standpoint, it was super cool, but it just kind of like, I don't know, like in the first Breath of the Wild, I kind of realized very quickly that the treat and the adventure of beating the end boss was not the best part of that game. It was actually the exploration and adventure you went through. So, and I will also say in Tears of the Kingdom, that's very similar. Like the treat and the best part of Tears of the Kingdom is 100% going through, exploring, and just enjoying yourself as you play through. You level up, you discover new ways of doing things, and you just creatively adventure throughout the game. But the end game sequence is absolutely amazing. I did post a video recently without commentary, so you won't have to listen to me in that video, of just going through and completing the game. I collected everything necessary to see all the different variations of what you would see post credits, stuff like that, obviously that you'd want to see. So you can check out that video if you want to, but just in case you haven't played through it and you want to, let me just put it this way. The end game sequence is so awesome. So it brings together all the epic moments and the story that you're going through your entire adventure in Tears of the Kingdom. It allows you to have a much more difficult, let's call it a dungeon, sure, because it's in the depths. I think that's not giving anything away. You could probably, even if you're playing through Tears of the Kingdom, you can probably, ascertain by this point that, the Demon King is in the depths somewhere, but the path to get to him, the path to go through all the different enemies, and then also, too, when you actually face him, I won't say how many forms there are or what he turns into or anything like that, but I will say this. It is much, much more difficult than the first one, and it just feels so much more like evil. It feels so much more dramatic. It feels so much more epic and legendary than the first one. Like this is the Legend of Zelda after all, right? Like this is supposed to be absolutely epic when you face him at the end, right? And it also, too, I'll say this, not just in the battle with the end boss and getting there and, doing everything you need to get there and having all the epic moments of bringing the story all together and everything you did in the story. But then also, too, there are some conclusions to the story that just make it that much more epic, that much more emotional, and bring you back to specific scenes and, add very detailed and awesome narrative to what you experienced earlier in the game, even to start the game. So it's just so cool. Like, I cannot tell you how much better I felt after beating this Tears of the Kingdom, this Breath of the Wild versus the first Breath of the Wild. After you beat the first Breath of the Wild, you're kind of like, oh, that's it, even though it was an amazing game and an amazing experience. But after you beat Tears of the Kingdom and you go through everything you have to do in order to beat it in the end game, you're like, I want to go back and see if I can do better. Like, it's almost like, yeah, I want to go back and experience that or maybe do something different or, I played it multiple times. I'm not going to lie. I think I played it like a handful of times, like 5 times. But I think I only beat the first Breath of the Wild once. And as soon as I beat it, I was like, I'm good. I don't need to play that, see that ending ever again. But this end game sequence brought everything together so well, provided you with epic moment after epic moment, and just ended the best game in the best way possible. So, yeah. Reason number 1 why Tears of the Kingdom deserves this year's Video Game of the Year is the endgame sequence is just so fulfilling, so exciting, so exhilarating, and it just like almost makes you like can't wait till the next Legend of Zelda game comes out. That's how good it is. All right, that's my top A list of why I think this year's video game of the year should go to Tears of the Kingdom, hands down. It was just an awesome experience playing this game. It changed my perspective on the franchise. It changed my perspective on gaming. It came with sky high expectations, knocked them out of the park, and just like, I could not put down this game. And sometimes I even dreamed of the various things that happened within this game. That's how epic, how raw, how emotional, how exhilarating this game truly was. And, you know, there's a lot of great games that are nominated for this year's Video Game of the Year, but you know, like in my very biased and humble opinion, I think it should go to Tears of the Kingdom. That's the one I voted for. I realize the general population's vote only counts for like, I think 10% of the vote, and 90% of it is much more educated, much more smart people that I'm sure are like, you know, video game experts. But I'm not sure how you all voted, but let me know below. Like, how did you vote? Did you vote for Video Game of the Year? Did you know you could vote? I'll pop a link below in case you want to vote before this coming Thursday. But you know, with that, I want to thank you for coming along this adventure with me, watching my video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel if you like video gaming content, whether for new games or older games alike. I am Chicago Retro Gamer after all. Make sure to also click on notifications so you are notified whenever my new videos come out. Greatly appreciated. Also, too, I realized that I only touched on a very small fraction of why this game is amazing. These were just my favorite reasons, my very biased opinion, but let me know below if I missed anything or what your favorite parts of Tears of the Kingdom was, or what you hated about it too. Like, hey, I realized that, you know, different strokes for different folks, but this game was not only game changing, it was a little bit life changing as well, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that is why I think it deserves to win this year's Game of the Year. With that, hopefully you all enjoyed my video, and just remember, damn, it feels good to be a gamer. Peace out, you guys.